You're listening to the Effective Statistician podcast, the podcast designed to help you reach your potential, lead great science, and serve patients. Today, it's episode number 65. Are you up for a job change? Insights from a recruiter, an interview with Jack Corbett. Welcome to the Effective Statistician with Alexander Schacht and Benjamin Pieskes, a weekly podcast for statisticians in the health sector who want to reach their potential to serve patients without becoming overwhelmed by work. So in today's episode, I had a couple of problems with the recording setup. So please bear with me in terms of a little bit of the quality, especially from my side. Jack's recording was much better, so bear with me. It will still be lots of great content. So the PSI conference is just over, and it was a really nice conference. And after the conference is before the conference. Next year, the PSI conference will be in Barcelona in 2020. And the usual abstract deadline for the PSI conference, at least for oral presentations, is in about November. So now it's time to start thinking about writing an abstract and submitting an abstract for the next PSI conference. To help you with that, I'm starting a challenge. Let's write our abstracts together. Just go to theeffectivestatistician.com/abstract challenge, all one word, and register if there your interest, and then we'll go together through this up to the submission deadline, so we can have really nice abstracts and can help each other to make them really good. So in today's episode, we'll talk all about changing jobs. We'll give you an overview of how the market for biostatistics look like in the UK, and Europe, and the US, and also what it takes to actually get into this pharmaceutical market, how to best work with recruiters, what are the different opportunities between academia, CRO and pharma, and also a couple of guidance on how to best find a new job and what to do in a CV, and we'll talk about applications and interviews. So watch out, lots of really nice content. As usual, this podcast is created in association with PSI, a global member organization dedicated to leading and promoting best practice and industry initiatives. Join PSI today to further develop your statistical capabilities with access to the special interest groups, the video-on-demand content library, free registration to all PSI webinars, and much more. The reduced rates is just £20 for non-high income countries and £95, which is also not a lot, for high income countries per year. Visit the PSI website at psiweb.org to learn more about PSI activities and become a PSI member today. Welcome to another episode of The Effective Statistician. And today I'm speaking with Jack Corbett from Hayes Life Science, and we will talk about changing jobs and what actually the insights from a recruiter that you can get. How are you doing?
I'm very well. Thank you very much for having me on the podcast. Very pleased to be here.
Okay, so maybe as a first step, can you introduce yourself to the listener?
Absolutely. So my name is Jack Corbett. I work for a global staffing specialist called Hayes Life Sciences. And my role within our business is I head up our biometrics team. So specifically, I work with life sciences companies across the UK, Europe, and the US, finding them statisticians, SAS programmers, data managers, all across the board, from sort of entry-level positions right up to sort of boardroom level appointments. So that's my role within our business.
Awesome. Yeah, and we worked together in the past already. So that's why I can tell you that it was a very, very nice experience. And so I'm really happy that you give a little bit of insights into these kind of things. So let's start a little bit with the overview of the biometrics market, and especially for statisticians at the various levels. The listeners of this podcast are really located around the globe, but of course, most of them, at least currently, are located in the US and Europe. And I'm still including UK for Europe. So,
yeah, let's not get onto that minefield.
so what is the current situation for the job market, and what is kind of your anticipated change in that regard for statisticians?
The current market, I have to say, favours the candidate more than the client, shall we say. We look at the market as a very sort of candidate-driven market, where what the trends that we see across sort of Europe and the US is that there are plenty of jobs. I think if you look at most sort of pharmaceutical companies, CROs, consultancies, biotechs, they are all very, very open and would like to hire sort of multiple statisticians. So it's a very, very interesting time, and I think there's a lot of opportunity if you can offer the correct skill set. But what comes with that is we are finding a slight candidate shortage, because in regards to the market, you tend to see pharma companies wanting to have people based on site. You want to have CROs who will offer people home-based. So I think the pharmaceutical companies are currently struggling to get people to be based on site because other companies will offer candidates to be based on home. So it's becoming quite an aggressive market in regards to companies offering different things to attract the talent. But then also on the side of that, you have to be mindful that because obviously what statisticians do, you're so niche, you're so technical, it's also the clients expect a high level of return, and they can be quite picky in regards to the candidates they choose. But overall, I would say there's a huge amounts of opportunity for candidates if you can provide the right skill set.
In terms of working remotely, how much of a topic is that in the discussions? Is that something that comes up very, very frequently?
Huge. Huge amounts we speak to companies, and it's a major talking point with companies. And I have to say, I can see both sides of the coin, as it was, and I have sort of sympathy for the hiring companies and for the candidates. The issue that we have is that I think in this, the world is changing. The workplace is changing, and companies need to be mindful of that and react to change. And one of those is obviously giving people, a better work-life balance, and I think the opportunity to work from home, greater level, is fantastic. Especially if people have got families and have other commitments, and if you're dealing with international teams, it's absolutely brilliant. But on the other side of that, I feel that the jobs that statisticians do, although we have fantastic technology to, practically be in a room with someone, on the drug development process, I feel that the pharmaceutical companies especially really want to strive to have teams on site so you can have that face-to-face interaction. and you can really sort of get to know your colleagues and teams and drive the drug development forward. And I do think it also has a very, very positive impact to your work-life balance as well by having that face-to-face interaction. I think it can help teams better. So it's a difficult conversation, and really depends on where the candidate is in their working life, and also what they want from a company and vice versa. There is no sort of right answer. I mean, if you want to work remotely, there's plenty of people who offer a full-time remote. But if you want to, sort of maybe look at maybe a pharma company, or, even sort of a bit more hands-on management of teams and things, you really need to look at working on site. So there's no right answer.
In terms of the career, I think it's also from the candidate's perspective. I would think that if you're very early in your career, I think there is lots of downsides to working completely remotely. I think if you work then kind of 4 days on site and you're working 1 day remotely, that is probably more of a possibility, also from a learning perspective. But I think when I entered into the pharmaceutical industry, well, working remotely wasn't that much of a topic at that time, but it's I really learned a lot and really benefited a lot from being on site. Whereas I think if you're 20 years in your career and you have a very good established network, it's less of a problem, I would think.
I agree, and I try, and I do obviously get some candidates who are younger in their career, and I completely agree with you. I try and ask them to sort of avoid, going for the sort of home-based role, because it also I think can slightly hinder your progression as well, because there's nothing better than collaborating with these teams and having these discussions and being involved in the sort of the face-to-face interactions. So being on site is a fantastic opportunity to really move forward in your career, and gets you a better sort of profile within the company, because people see you and know who you are. So that's also something to be mindful of.
Yeah. In terms of let's say the international levels, it's just kind of in rough numbers. Do you see big kind of differences between countries in terms of opportunities? Is there more opportunities in the UK than in Germany or the US? Or do you see any kind of differential effects there?
Interesting question. Not really. You obviously have certain hubs. So obviously the countries that I tend to do most of my work is the UK, Belgium, Germany, and a bit of France, and obviously the US, which there's just huge amounts of opportunity in the US. But
and Switzerland, I guess,
and Switzerland, of course, yes, of course, which again is obviously a very big hub and a very attractive proposition for many people. But also the thing is, it's slightly difficult to say, where is the demand, because obviously now, because you have so many CROs and consultancies offering full-time sort of remote, it's led for people to be based anywhere in Europe effectively. We've placed people in nearly every country in pretty much Europe, and that's the offering. But I think at the moment, especially with the pharma companies, there's still a huge drive to get people within sort of pharma companies in the UK. We're continually working within Belgium. The German market continues to sort of have that sort of demand for talent, and as well as Switzerland. So they're the kind of main ones. But as I say, not really main hotspots, because the remote working aspect, which is good.
Yeah. So I see that I've worked in teams where the people were, especially contractors, were kind of distributed all across Europe, and they were really very good skilled people, and so I think they were very, very employable, and therefore could work for lots of different clients. So that's about the current situation. Do you see that changing dramatically in the future?
We are starting to actually. It's interesting you said that. I don't see it changing. I see it continuing in regards to the sort of home working. There'll always be that CRO aspect. CROs do a sort of fantastic. They play a fantastic role in the drug development, and they will continue to allow people to work sort of remotely. But I think what I am starting to see is a slight shift in the trend of especially with sort of biometrics and specifically statistics. We went through a period with huge amounts of outsourcing for the pharmaceutical companies and sort of a decrease in the sort of investment within sort of biometrics teams. I think we did see that with many of the bigger players. I am starting to see a slight shift in that, and I'm starting to see more pharmaceutical companies maybe slightly reduce their outsourcing projects and bring some of the biometrics in-house. I've had some companies who have sort of outsourced all of it and now have recently come to me and asked for sort of 3 or 4 hires and are looking to sort of build up these teams again. So I think that is so positive for the market. I think if we can get involved, more investment, more training within the pharmaceutical companies, that really will increase the talent in the market, will increase opportunity, and will also, provide more skilled workers to the CROs, consultancies, biotech. So I really hope that trend continues, but also, have the CRO aspect.
Okay, very good. So in this kind of field where you have now really a surplus of vacancies and a scarcity in terms of candidates, what's kind of the best way if you want to change a job? How you can find relevant jobs that could be interesting for you?
Interesting question. I think there are a couple of aspects to this. I mean, I personally think, a good recruiter will add huge amounts of value to your job search and open some very exciting doors for the candidates. I think you need to have candidates first of all need to have sort of a clear idea of, what they're looking to do and where they're looking to go within their career. And obviously a good recruiter will then be able to steer you down that road and advise you on sort of companies. I think.
So in terms of that, just kind of double clicking on this, in terms of knowing what your strengths are, knowing what you want from a company in terms of development, what kind of therapeutic areas you would love to work on, which kind of phases of drug development you would like to work on, these kind of things.
Yes, absolutely. So having an idea of, what value you can add there and what you would like the company to give you in the future. So absolutely. So, the sort of the trial designs that you can do at the moment and where you want to get in the future in regards to, do you want to continue being an individual contributor working on high level projects? Do you want to manage? I think you've got to have that clear understanding. And the role as a recruiter will be able to advise you. Our role is to advise and support you on where these opportunities are. And also we have a high level of responsibility to obviously advise you the right opportunities and not just advise you on a job because maybe they're paying a bit more than an original company. You need to have that sort of, we need to show that responsibility to the candidate and advise them properly so they will benefit in their career.
So how do you actually reach out to a recruiter? How does that usually work? Do I just kind of go on LinkedIn and say, post something like, "Hey recruiters, I'm up for a new job"? Or how does that work?
Well, I think we're all quite lucky, really. I think the biometrics market, from a candidate and client perspective, is fairly small. And I think, to be honest, it's fairly small within the recruitment sector as well. So I think, to be honest, if you did a search on LinkedIn, I think, several names would pop up that you'd probably be familiar with. So I think, you want to have a look, you want to have a search on LinkedIn look at the biometrics recruiters, look at the types of roles they're advertising. If you're looking for, go onto their website, go onto their LinkedIn page, what kind of roles are they advertising? Are they, very contract biased? You're not looking for a contract job. Maybe look at another recruiter. Are they dealing with pharma companies? You'll see these advertisements. And have a look at that and get a feel for where they're focusing, because obviously they'll focus on certain locations. So gain that little bit of information, just the same as we would by having a look at a candidate's LinkedIn profile. But furthermore, what I would say is also interview the recruiter. I mean, obviously we're very approachable people. I think obviously this is why we work in the job that we do. And I think it's important to interview your recruiter, because I think a relationship between a good candidate and a recruiter is vital. What I would personally say is speak to the recruiter. Does he have an understanding of what I do, where I'm looking to go? Personally, I would say that a recruiter should always be open about the clients and about the people that he's dealing with. So if I speak to a candidate, I will always be very open about where their CV's going, who I'm working with, who the hiring managers are, and really put that trust in them. And once you build that relationship, they will then take your profile to the market, and as long as they're acting responsibly, they're going to open some fantastic doors. But it's having that, sort of communication, trust, and sort of honest relationship. That's where you'll, sort of benefit.
Yeah, and I think that is really, really important. One other area where you can actually meet recruiters is, for example, at PSI Conference. There's usually some booths of recruiting companies, and you will meet people there. And that's also a nice situation where you just can have a relaxed chat about these kind of things. So another alternative.
Absolutely, we'll be there. We'll be exhibiting this year in London. So so you can always pop along to the Hayes stand.
Yeah. By the way, we are recruiting this now before the conference, but it goes live after the conference. So.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, edit that bit out then.
No, we can keep it just in. And remember, next year's PSI conference in 2020 will be also very, very attractive, especially also from a location perspective. So, just check out psiweb.org to learn more about that. In terms of these kind of things, it's really important to build a good relationship with the recruiter, and that the recruiter is informing on all the kind of open positions and contacts you before he sends CVs there. I once had a situation where a good friend of mine told me he had quite a nasty incident. His company was bought by a bigger company, and the recruiter wasn't aware about that and sent his CV to the bigger company.
Yes, that's never ideal.
So just to kind of avoid these kind of things is really, really important in terms of yeah. So in terms of that, I think it's good to build a really trusting relationship, and transparency is really one of the key things into that. In terms of other things, what can candidates do, let's say, for example, on LinkedIn to, maybe also be found by recruiters that look for candidates for their clients, for the companies that they're working for?
Great question. And I think LinkedIn is such a powerful tool that if you are going to look for another position, then you need to build your online profile, specifically with LinkedIn. I don't think there's a recruiter out there who doesn't use LinkedIn. I'm pretty much on it every single day for 10 hours a day. So, you definitely won't have a problem finding a recruiter. I think you've got to, Hayes actually do some sort of LinkedIn profile building seminars as well, which I could also send you a link to, which are very, very interesting because we work directly with LinkedIn on this, and we can get some information, and any candidates who are interested, we can help with that. But from my point of view, it's fairly simple. Your LinkedIn profile is effectively your CV. So it's an opportunity to not just show recruiters, but to show, your peers, your working groups, your experiences, your skills, and what you are sort of doing at this moment in time. So treat your treat your LinkedIn profile as an opportunity to show off your skill set. So it's always important to keep your job history up to date, but also to give information on your job history. So what you are doing, what you have done in those roles, so what you've worked on. So for example, if you are a early phase statistician working on phase 1, phase 2, with experience within sort of things like Bayesian, or and have sort of led submissions, put that on your LinkedIn profile. Why? Because if you are a recruiter and say one of my clients comes to me and says, Jack, we're looking for an early phase statistician who has knowledge of Bayesian. Well, what we're going to do is we are going to search LinkedIn for profiles of candidates who have that and who have done that. So when we do that search, we'll get a list of 100 profiles, and then we will look through them, we'll know some of them, and obviously we'll have a network ourselves. So if you're looking to be identified, you need to keep your LinkedIn up to date. And obviously it's critical that you have the relevant information on, because that's how you'll be searched and that's how you'll be identified. And also a good profile.
So not just kind of I was working for Big Pharma X and then for Big Pharma Y, but you really need to be much more specific about your responsibilities there. Okay.
Absolutely.
And further, beyond the kind of job description, the specific job descriptions?
Well, then also, LinkedIn is obviously a very, very powerful tool in the fact of, there are sort of working groups and the way to be involved in sort of discussions and things like that. If you can actively participate and build your online profile, being involved in some of these groups and getting involved in sort of discussions and sharing sort of useful information, it's also building up your social media profile. It's just building that profile and getting, more emphasis on your profile, and it will be seen by more people. The more activity you're doing, the more opportunity you'll have to be contacted by not just a recruiter, but by a company. And also with our digital footprint as well, companies look into that. And they will find, just because what you're doing right now, maybe you've done something before, maybe you participated in something previously, they might find that really interesting, because obviously we all have a digital footprint now. So it's just building that social media profile, which I think is really, really important, and will also allow not just maybe some other opportunities you weren't even considering to be presented to you. So it's really, really vital.
Yeah, I can say that also from my perspective, as I've been hiring people, one of the first things that I look into is the LinkedIn profile, just to kind of get an understanding of the person, what's this, where's the background, where they're coming from. Sometimes, the CV is missing a photos, and I can find the photos there. These kind of things is always quite helpful.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, a good CV will always go to a client, and then we can assist with sort of CVs and CV workshops. And a CV is very, very powerful, because also one of the biggest mistakes we see in the recruitment market is people they'll send one CV out to multiple roles. Now, you should never do that. You should tailor your CV for that specific role, because that role will be there's no one role. Unless I'm mistaken, there is no one role in each company that is going to be the same. So why, I always ask candidates, why do you then think it's okay to just send a generic CV? We've told you what the company are looking for. So it's very much sort of tailoring it and showing that commitment to the company. And a good recruiter will then take that CV as far as they can to not just sort of HR, but getting in front of, the sort of hiring managers and having discussions over the phone. So that's really, really vital. But I think, it's a starting point where LinkedIn is crucial, just a starting point, because that's where you're initially going to be identified, really.
It's really kind of quality over quantity. It's much more important to go with quality to specific companies rather than to have a kind of approach where you, let's say, distribute a generic CV very, very widely. Yeah.
Yes, and that's why if you're dealing with a recruiter, you should always, this would be my tip to any candidate, always make sure you get in writing who your CV is being sent to. And if before you present your CV to them, make sure you're having that discussion about where it's going, who the hiring managers, and getting that information, because it's critical that as a candidate, you retain control over your job search. And also, I think you need to remember that it is very important to have a good relationship, but also a recruiter, in a way, the candidate is our client. So we need to be mindful and respect their wishes, and you need to keep control.
Okay. One other aspect is kind of in terms of recruiting is, well, there's pharma, there's CROs, there's academia. Where do you see the biggest differences in terms of the opportunities between these things? We have shortly talked about, we have actually a lot talked about remote working and how that is different. What are other differences between these three groups?
Okay, so what are the differences? I think we tend to see, so pharmaceutical companies act very obviously differently to CROs. So a CRO, and this is obviously no disrespect to CROs, but a CRO is there to effectively, the pharmaceutical company is their client. They are there to drive the studies and get the projects out as quickly as possible for obviously, financial gains, which which everyone knows. So what does that mean? That means that the studies and the projects you're working on will be quite fast paced. They'll be probably need to be delivered quicker. There'll be timelines. There'll be stricter timelines, should we say? So you tend to see a bit of a more sort of fast-paced sort of environment in a CRO. Within obviously the sort of pharmaceutical and the academia, obviously that's very much more sort of drug development driven. We tend to see people who enter the sort of go from either academia into sort of pharmaceutical, who have that real interest in the drug development, have that real sort of scientific interest, whereas obviously people in the CROs may, not tend to be as interested within the sort of drug development. They love the statistics and they're great at what they do, but they're not hugely interested in drug development. So it really depends on what your own personal preference is. If you're really interested about the scientific aspect, like, if you want to work in a pharmaceutical company where you'll be involved in research projects, have links with academia where you can work on publications and have that real drive for the scientific aspect, there's huge amounts of opportunity to do that and cross over with academia. But again, moving on to the CRO side, you don't tend to see that as much. So again, it really comes down to personal preference of what you want to do.
Do you see a lot of obviously you have lots of salary discussions as well. Do you see bigger differences in terms of salary between pharma and CRO?
So what we tend to see, the trend in the market is this. A pharmaceutical company will offer a better package. So for the likes of, for example, once you kind of look at getting to the sort of associate director level, for example, a pharmaceutical company will give you incredible packages to really secure your future with the things like very strong pension, shares, sort of higher bonuses, and that's really kind of attractive to people. CROs tend to maybe pay a little bit more, but have a sort of less of a package. That's the current trend. So, with a CRO, you'll tend to maybe get sort of a bonus, a small bonus, maybe a little car allowance, but not too much more. So the benefit of going to sort of pharmaceutical companies is a package can really, you may even be paid a little bit less, but actually when you look at your package, it probably will offer you a lot more security. So that's what we kind of see. And then obviously academia is, tends to be a lot lower on the salary, but people will work in academia for different reasons. So that's, so they're not financially motivated.
Yeah. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Any hints that you would give to a candidate in terms of how best to kind of approach this salary discussion?
Be open and honest with your recruiter. I always say to my candidates, where I will really add value to this is obviously opening the doors and getting you in front of this, but at the end of the day, the candidate is the one who's going to get this job. They're going to do the interview. They're going to show off their skills. They're going to, warm to the hiring manager. They're going to be the one who gets hired. They're going to get this job. Where a recruiter can come into play, and a good recruiter should do, they will be good at negotiating your salary. So what I would say, be open, honest. I tend to get candidates, and this happens all the time, where they tell me their salary, and I know their salary maybe is probably a little bit less than what they're saying, but obviously they're looking to achieve more if they're after that sort of financial gain. Don't worry about that. A recruiter's there to get the best deal possible for you and for the client. So be open and honest, and tell a good recruiter, where you want to be. What do you want to achieve? If the recruiter is true to his word and he's dealing with these companies and he understands the salaries and the levels and the packages, he'll be able to advise you what is achievable and what isn't. And I think people have to remember as well that obviously we don't get we don't get paid up front as it was. You have to get the job for a recruiter to be paid in most instances. So again, we're here to support the whole thing and get you the best deal. So that's all I would say is leave it to the recruiter and let them do what they're trained to do.
It's the magic of the HR decline, so to say. Yep. In terms of the process, what's kind of common process that people will go through when they have when they go into an interview? Does it always kind of start with a screening interview, or is it at least very common, or is that something that is going away and people go directly to a face-to-face interview?
Again, this is very sort of specific company led. Is in a way what we're seeing at the moment. What tends to happen, and this is the sort of the norm. What you'll tend to do is you will usually have a screening interview, obviously with HR first. Get your motivations, what do you understand about the company, why are you looking to apply, and have those sort of softer HR questions. Once you have sort of passed that, then yes, they would either look to set up a sort of face-to-face with a manager, or go straight to a face-to-face or a telephone with the hiring manager, or go straight face-to-face. That is the kind of norm, and we usually see for most roles a 2 or 3 stage interview process. On the permanent side, contract is very different. But a lot of the clients that I work with, I'm very lucky that hopefully they trust my knowledge. So we tend to sort of avoid the HR, and that's what I'm here for. And then we'll sort of go straight to a telephone interview with the manager and have and then go to a face-to-face. But what I always encourage my clients to do is try and have an informal conversation first, just to get an idea, a feel for the candidate and a feel for, where they'd fit in the role, and vice versa. I think that really helps to waste a lot of time. But there doesn't tend to happen too much in the market. But we are seeing a movement in obviously technology. A lot of clients are becoming more open to sort of Skype interviews, sort of video calling, which is fantastic, because if as I say, with candidates based remotely all over Europe and the world, in fact, we're tending to see companies be a lot more open to that. So have a Skype interview, and I've had interview process which is done completely over Skype, and they haven't even met face to face. But again, individual sort of company preferences, really.
Okay, interesting. How about presentations, especially at kind of face-to-face settings? Is that something that is very common, that is candidates are getting asked to present on a topic of choice?
Absolutely. I tend to see it more within the pharmaceutical companies and the biotechs, where they would like a presentation. Some of my clients that I deal with, and I'm thinking about sort of 4 or 5 companies, or a big sort of large pharma, who ask for presentations. Yeah, they ask for sort of a 5 or 10 minute presentation on your choice, really. On your choice of a statistical project, or whatever really you like. Just something to showcase not only your understanding of statistics, but I think what's vital, especially within obviously, in biometrics, is how you explain that to a non-technical audience. And I think that's really vital. So that's really what they're looking for. Unfortunately, as a recruiter, I do struggle to help with the presentations because I still count on my fingers, so I can't really advise too much on that. But I have to trust the candidate, really. But yeah, we do see that. We do see that quite common. That's more, to be honest, more when you kind of get to that sort of principal and above role.
Okay. Very good. So in terms of maybe the last question is, you mentioned kind of associate director level, principal level. I personally struggle a lot with these kind of different levels because my perception is they are different in every company, and it's really hard for to see. Well, in some companies they are called associate director, and then in other companies they are called senior statistician, and then yet in another company they are called, I don't know, research scientist or whatsoever. Is there any help on that, or is it just kind of you need to get into it to really understand it?
To be honest, Alexander, I have to be honest with you. It's one of the most confusing things I have to deal with. So I can't tell you how many times I look at job titles and I just think I really don't know what level that is. It is a bit of a problem with our industry. I have to say, as you've just said there's so many job titles, there's so many weird and wonderful names and things out there that there is no way to help. That the only real way is by having that understanding of what do you do and where you'll fit within that company. I think in other industries, I think there's a real kind of drive for getting a sort of director title, or people are very sort of mindful of their own title. I think, to be honest, it's not something that we come into in biometrics too much because I don't think anyone understands what the titles are. So we're quite lucky in that fact, really.
Yeah. So what I really kind of look then into is the job description. And what does a job description have in there? Is there lots of kind of entry-level tasks in it? So like writing the SAP and writing program specifications, or is there more kind of strategic things into it, like designing the overall program for development and direct interaction with regulatory stakeholders and things like that? So I think from that level, from job description, you can probably better see what's kind of the level you're looking for.
So what I would say is, it's for candidates, I always say be quite mindful of job specs and don't read in too much to a job spec either. If the job spec is very, very well written and been written by the hiring manager, speak to the recruiter, and really get an understanding for that. But also be mindful that some of these job specs can be quite generic. They can also be written by more sort of a HR who maybe is not as technical. So you've also got to be mindful of that. Job specs don't always tell the full story. They're great to get an outline of the role and what you'll be doing, yes. But again, you really need to be speaking to your recruiter, and what specifically will this hiring manager be looking for, and really get the main information from them. Because I also know companies that tend to use job specs that are a bit outdated. And that's where my knowledge comes in advising the candidates. So I'd be slightly wary of that. And I think candidates need to be mindful of that.
Okay, thanks so much. That was an amazing interview. We talked about a lot of different things. We got an overview of how the biometrics market. We discussed a couple of different things in terms of open vacancies across different locations, differences in terms of working remotely or not, the benefits of these, opportunities within CRO, academia, and pharma, and how that is might differ in terms of what you do, and also how generally the interview process works. So thanks a lot, Jack, for this really, really nice insights into that, and really looking forward to continue to working with you. And check out the theeffectivestatistician.com, where you will find also show notes. We will put also links that Jack mentioned in there. And of course, you will also find his bio and his photo and his links to him there. Thanks so much, Jack.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me, Alexander. I really enjoyed this.
This show was created in association with PSI. Thanks for listening. Please visit theeffectivestatistician.com to find the show notes and learn more about our podcast to boost your career as a statistician in the health sector. And don't forget about the abstract writing challenge. Register your interest and I'll help you to write your abstract. Next week we'll speak about impactful presentations. And I have a really nice guest there that will help you to avoid common mistakes. So, reach your potential, lead great science, and serve patients. Just be an effective statistician.